Hey everyone, this video is a continuation of the last one I did. You don't have to have watched the previous one to figure out what's going on. I'm actually taking some code I wrote before, and I'm going to be converting it to use proxies. I'm going to use JavaScript proxies to render out HTML as a string. Hi everybody who came. What we're going to go over is, let's see, first on the agenda, I want to go over all the work that we did 2 days ago and figure out how to do this with a proxy. So if you weren't here, I cleaned this up a bit and moved the files around. This was the question. It basically said that if you have a format.div, you call it as a function, it does this. This is pretty easy, right? Where you get a div and it returns you back a value. But this was a little bit different for me. So it took me a while. I was like, okay, I know there's a way to do this. You can hack into like when you hit the dot here and then you can return an object that then has the function in it. But the problem was you had to return both a function and an object at the same time. And I was like, well, I could fake adding these properties on that object, but I was trying to do it correctly. And so I did that, and what we ended up with was a function that was pretty big like this. But basically, you'd create your string formatter, and that was the other problem, is you'd have to wrap your string formatter in something else and then return that back so that next time the string formatter got called, it would be a little bit different. Why is this chat not going away? That's a good question, because the chat's supposed to go away after 60 seconds. There it goes. Okay, cool. So what should we do here? What I was doing is I was creating the properties, right? And the properties were from this function. It would run through a loop and it would get you all your getter functions. And so it, basically when you did a dot something, that would be your getter function. And then we changed it, and we changed it so that we were doing that part. And then we were doing here, defining the properties on an object. So we were taking our string formatter, defining a bunch of properties on it. And I think they go on the prototype. That's how this ended up working correctly. And then we returned our string formatter. So our string formatter now became our this, whereas when we started the function, it wasn't string formatter. It was the object that had this on it originally, which was a format. So we created a null object and we put these properties on it. And then the next time around, we created a string formatter, and then we assigned these properties to the string formatter. And so now when we return, you can call it as a function, but also you can do a dot something, and you get like dot h1, and it can progressively wrap these things. And you'll end up with something like this, where you do .div.p.span, and you will get a value wrapped in all of those different elements and the text that you put in there. And also, I didn't notice this when I was working on it, but it also wanted to be able to accept multiple arguments and then tie them all together. So we did all this. To do multiple arguments, you did dot values, and we concatenated them as part of this HTML. So this is what we ended up with. This is like our function that made everything work properly. We had the value here has nothing to do with actual values. It has to do with when you're overriding a get function, or this could be the get here. When you're overriding a value of a property, when you're doing something like this, we ended up having to put this value here. It's a little bit more complicated, and this is probably the least understood part of the whole thing if you were just looking at it for the first time. But it is a function that returns a function, and the function takes an HTML formatter, which we're going to use to wrap our HTML output, and then the tag name itself that we're going to be wrapping it with. And then it's going to take here the values that we pass in once we do call the function, and then that will output this formatted string. So until we actually do that, we won't output the string, because we're going to keep wrapping. This function will get called, so we'll return this function, and then this function will keep getting returned back and forth and keep getting wrapped until we finally end up calling it, and then we return a value. And the way we're updating the format string is with this. So basically, this function is providing us a formatter string, which by default is nothing. And then when we create our formatter, we're passing that in. And then we're also, the next time we create the formatter properties, we're now passing in our string formatter, which is going to be our format HTML string. So that is going to wrap it. So basically the output, this function that we created is going to return a function that takes a value and does all this. And then we're going to pass in that the next function. And when we call it again, we're going to pass into another one like this, but it'll have a different HTML tag, and it'll just keep being wrapped by this constantly. That's how we're getting that order in there. So what we need to do today is we need to make it so what we can do is use a proxy. And so instead of Object.create like we were doing here, we're going to use a proxy to hack into the get function here. And I was trying to log this out before, and I was saying, why every time do I hit .a is it logging the property name? So I was doing like a format.a.b.c.d, and I was doing this in the console in Chrome. Every time you do something like this, Chrome is calculating that behind the scenes, and it's giving you a value. And so they're actually doing the .a.b.c.d every time. And so that's how that's working. So what we actually need to do is when we do .a, the get function runs. If we do .b, it's going to call that on whatever this is returning. So if we returned here, which right now we're just returning the proxy property name from this proxy, or we're returning the proxy itself, which is really confusing. This proxy here, I'm calling it proxy, but it's the object of the proxy. It should be this essentially of it. So instead of this being like a function, we get this like that. It's just an object. It's either this object or it's the entire proxy object with this get on it. So the benefit of this over this other method that we were using over here is that this other method I had to reduce on the HTML tag name. So let's start up here. We have these HTML tag names, div h1, p, and span. And I'm looping through them with a reduce function. And I'm creating a new object with each property now has a get function associated with it. With the proxy, I don't have to do that. I can just put the get here and it will, when I put this get here, it will do this essentially, but for every single possible value. So even if it wasn't just div, it was something else. We could just generate random HTML elements with this. We could also limit it to just those 4 if we really wanted to. So we could say like HTML tag names, and we could make sure the property name, if this includes that, then we will do something different, or we will execute the normal way that this would function, which is we would return. So I'm going to comment that out. We would return, we don't have to return. I'm implicitly returning here. Let me do this again. All right. Then we would return, it's a reflect.get, and we need to pass in the object and the property name. I'm pretty sure that's how this works. So what this reflect does is it's like a global, and it's meant to work with proxy, but you can use it anywhere. And it's really nice because, for instance, if you ever deleted something from an object, so you have something like this, right? And you have A and it's fun, something like that. And you want to delete A out of the object, you would have to do delete object.a, that. And that would delete A out of the object. So if console log object here, actually, that's not how you do it. If you console log object, you're going to get, because we deleted it out. If you console log objects here, what's going to end up happening is you'll still get this. This is what's going to end up logging. So you'll get that. So the benefit here of the reflect is that now you, instead of delete like that, you can call reflect.deleteProperty, and you give it the object and you give it the property name, which I think is a string like this. And now this will delete it out of the object. And I guess the benefit to me of doing it this way is now you've got a function call instead of something like this, which is not a function call. It technically is a function call behind the scenes, but it's not. So it's like typing const. So it's more explicit here that you're deleting the property. It's more obvious what's going on. So I like that better for that situation. I just learned about this a couple days ago when I was doing this project. So what I'm interested in seeing is if we will do this in the case that this is not correct. So we don't know what we're going to do here yet, but I know what I'm going to do in this case. So the alternate will return back the normal thing. So we will get undefined if we type in something that's not one of these HTML tags. And it could be one of these initial properties, so it still could be we still could be calling string formatter, create string formatter. Then that would call the get string formatter. Also the difference here with this proxy is that we don't have to do this this value part here, which was really confusing. We won't have to do it with the proxy. As far as I know, we're going to pass this object in, and this property will be defined on the object. So what we have to do now is replicate this functionality from the get here. We have to create the string formatter, and then do all that stuff. So I'm trying to think how I want to do it. Because I don't know if I want to call proxy.createStringFormatter. Yeah, I don't know. This is where it gets tough, right? Because we don't exactly know what we want to do here. Or really, I don't know exactly what I want to do. I've been thinking about it, and this is as far as I got. So for now, let's just make this a function that returns values, just so I can keep track of it, make that easier for you guys. And then we're going to else here, and we'll return the reflect here. Otherwise, we're going to return who knows what. Okay, so what happens before this? What are we going to do at this point? What we want to do in the proxy is we want to return a function with properties on it. So probably this code here, but we really want to return a new proxy that has all that stuff on it because obviously the only way this worked before is we had to call the function right here and pass it our string formatter. And then it would attach this in and then come through again. We don't have to do that. There's a way around it. We're going to find out as I go through this. If any of you have a different challenge for me to do today, that's fine. I can definitely do that. I can switch gears. I can do that challenge. I can answer your questions if you have any questions. especially if you're confused about what we're doing or why we're doing it. And yeah, so this proxy thing is really cool, but I'm not personally as familiar with it. But then again, I'm also not familiar with Object.defineProperties or Object.create. I thought I knew what this did, and now I know way more about it than I ever did. Let's see here. I want to say, when you do the dot on the get, I'm also wondering if we can override the apply method. So the thing is, if you call a thing as a function, then you would get the apply. But I don't think you can have the get and the apply on here. Because if you have the apply, okay, now it's like saying, oh, if I'm trying to get a function out of it, if I'm calling it like a function, then therefore that's the apply being put on there. But I think that's for the proxy itself. And I want to make sure this proxy is what I expect it to be. As far as I know, whatever I pass in here is the proxy, but I'm not 100% sure. And I do think we need Object.defineProperties. I just think maybe we don't need it because we can just proxy our string formatter. Okay, let's try that. So let's copy this part. And we know the tag name because the tag name is going to be the property name that came in. I would like to call it HTML tag name. Yeah, then now we know what that property name is equal to. Because we said if HTML tag names includes the property name, therefore our HTML tag name is that property name. And then we need a string, the formatter string. And this is tricky because normally it was being passed in. Now it's not being passed in. So I wonder if, because we're going to return the string formatter, and when we call it, it would do that. What if they put dot something else and the string formatter is now our object that's being proxied? So we can just call it straight up. We can call, so in the next round, we would do proxy like that. So the problem here is the first one, it doesn't work, but the second one, we can do that. So I wonder if we can do a ternary here. Let's do that. If proxy is a function, I don't know if this will work. I wonder if it's actually type of proxy. And you can use type of this. We can also use object.is if I want to do that. What's making me wonder here is that, do we want to check if the type of the proxy is a function or if proxy is an instance of function? I think we want to check if it's a type of function, because if you move it to a different window or something like that, for some reason, the instance won't be the same. Sometimes the instance of function won't be equal. Even though they're both an instance of function, they're a different instance of function from different browser windows or tabs or iframes and stuff like that. So what I would like to do is something like this. I know it doesn't matter for our example, but I want to do this. So this is our check to check if type of proxy is function. And then we're going to, if it is a function, we have our string formatters, our proxy now. And we do need to wrap it though in another create string formatter. Just the format HTML string, would it be our proxy? Is that how we want to do this? Oh, so I'm doing this wrong. Our string formatter will always be this function. But in this case, is it going to be this function with the proxy or is it going to be this function with nothing? And we don't really have a case in our function here to deal with like when we don't have a proxy. Oh, I know what to do. Duh. It's the same as this one. By default, this is our thing. So we'll just put this default up here. And then if we don't pass one in, we don't have it. But proxy does exist. Proxy does, I'm going to keep that. Proxy does exist. No matter what, it's either going to be an object or it's going to be a function. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do the proxy is type of function. Otherwise, we're going to, so we'll return proxy. Otherwise, we'll return that guy like that. Okay. Is there anything else we need to do here? We defined this up here under initial properties. So we could just define this outside of this function. It doesn't really have to go in the function at all in our proxy. Yeah, because I had this initial properties and I was going to call proxy dot this thing. I guess we could do that so it's self-contained, but we really don't need to be doing this now because then I have to pop it back in when I do a new proxy. And I want the new proxy to be a little different. Let me think. This doesn't need to be part of the proxy because we're never directly calling it. Internally, it's going to call it, but we're not calling it. So let's experiment with not having it as part of the proxy. So in the initial properties here, we don't have it. So our proxy is proxying an object of nothing initially until the next time we run proxy. Okay, so we don't need that. And then in here, we don't need this named whatever. This is just going to be this function. That'll make it even easier to work with this code. So less indirection. Okay, so we're going to stop complaining. Unexpected token colon. So now what we're going to do is, so we're saying on get, we get these values out, and I'm just going to format this like I do the rest of the code. Okay. If our tag names includes the property name, then we're going to do a bunch of stuff. Otherwise, we're going to return the default behavior that we would have had we not come in here and wrote a custom get function. Okay. So that's that return statement. This return statement is still going to be related to this. We're not done yet. We probably need to do the define properties, but I think you can get around it by doing a new proxy. Because I want another proxy. I want to create a proxy out of our string formatter. So I'm wondering if we can just new proxy like this. And the first arg is our string formatter now. And the second arg are our properties, which is this function. What if this function, because we don't care about this, we can pull this out. We can definitely pull this out. And this will now be called proxy getter. Okay. I don't know what's going to make sense to anybody. Okay. So our proxy getter is now this function. Yes. And now we can return a new proxy here, and the proxy getter is not correct. This has to be an object. It's not a function. We have to return this as an object with a get property. There we go. Yeah, did it wrong. Okay, so we need, now it's our proxy getter. It's not our proxy getter though, it's our proxy options, let's check here real quick. So I did keep this open. When you're defining a proxy, the second arg is called the handler. But it's not a handler, it's the object. Yeah, I'm gonna call it options because it's not a handler. I would think it's a function. I wouldn't think it's like something that defines the functionality. So what's proxy options? Okay, problem solved there. I think it's done. So this, instead of the get here, we just do proxy options. And it's similar to what we had before over here. And we should be on the proxy step. Yes. Format object create. Why is it erroring? Because there's no $sign? This is, no, I wanted the index file. Both of these need $signs. Okay, cool. So this is our original functionality that we know worked. And this is our new functionality. Hey, we're done. Cool. So what was like extremely hard for me to do 2 days ago is super easy now. I completely understand it. Oops. I completely understand it. And it was like 10 times as easy today. We're doing the same code. Okay. So this is, I created an observable here that takes these two and then outputs them like this. That's all I'm doing. Just takes two, the exact same two for both of them. In fact, what we should do is have two args. So we should try the foo bar example. We can use caps like that for the second one. That's fine. Okay. So yeah, we got foo bars one word and foo bars one word. Cool. This is now a better solution than we had before. And it's a lot simpler. So let's look at this. Let's look at the similarities. This looks almost identical, but the difference here is we're calling a function. And over here, we are just passing in our options straight up. The other difference is that this create formatter properties, like I said, it was a function and it's doing a lot. It has to loop these HTML tag names every time. We are looping the HTML tag names, but we are only looping them when the property name comes in. So technically this is less performant because it has to do this check every single time to see if it's one of the tag names, but it's not like a big deal. It's not that noticeable. And it's only for the 4 things in an array that you're looping. If you need performance, this might be a better method, but also we're not mutating anything here. As far as I know, yeah, we're creating a new proxy, which returns a value. Whereas over here, we're doing Object.defineProperties and we're mutating string formatter to have these on the prototype. And then we're returning that out. And that's how it's working. Over here, we don't have to do that. Like this logic is a lot simpler. And then this reflect is like the default behavior. So if we had any other behavior, that's what it would do. It would return undefined. Technically, we can make this a little simpler because I don't care about this reflect behavior. I could return undefined anyway, if that wasn't the case. I'm trying to think if I care. I think, you know what? I'm going to leave it like this with the reflect. And the reason I'm going to leave it like this is because what if you do object.something, right? Or function.something or toString or something like that. This would be the default behavior. If we got rid of this, it would just be undefined every time. You wouldn't even get the default behavior that you would look for. So yeah, this is definitely the way you would do it. You'd always want to have a default case in there for the cases where you're not trying to hack into the .get function and do all of that. Not the .get, the getter function. So because this is a getter function. Now, the other thing over here that we had to worry about is this context. And that caused a lot of problems for me trying to figure out like how I'm going to do it 2 days ago. But yeah, it's because it had to be a normal function for this to work. I don't think it has to be, but we put this on the this. And did it need to be on the this? Now that I think about it, because it doesn't care about this. Because then we don't have to have this value thing. You know what? Let's try changing it so it matches this side of the code. I don't think this function needs to be there. There's absolutely no reason. If we're going to close over it, it exists regardless. So let's see if we can, now using our new knowledge from here, clean up this side. You know what? I'm just going to copy paste. There's nothing different. Initial properties. We don't have any anymore. It's just that. I think before it was confusing because I was trying to do a little bit more, or not just a little bit more. I was trying to do a lot more than I needed. Pretty sure. Yeah, see, we got the same output. So yeah, all that work the whole time for this particular piece, it was not needed. But actually, most of the time I spent was just trying to figure out this thing where you're calling into itself, and then you're passing the string formatter. Like I didn't figure that out till near the end of this, and then this Object.defineProperties was a lot more difficult. Yeah, this is, okay, so there's a difference here, right? This is more efficient in some ways. This is way easier to maintain and to code, and the performance impact is minimal. It's not going to be a big deal. So I would rather use this method if I could. So if I had to come in and edit this code from somebody, I wouldn't want to touch this part. Thankfully, the top is the same. Look, these are identical. In fact, compare. Yeah. Okay. The differences between these two, they're out of order. Sorry, let me just switch the order here. These are the differences here. Most of it is exactly the same. Just some of the code around it is different. It's really all that's different. So hopefully that kind of puts it into perspective. The difference in it is mainly the length, the amount of lines, and the amount of like code that's difficult to understand is really where it comes down to, because this one actually ended up being longer. Why? Because of this case, the return case with the else here. Is that why it's longer? Otherwise, this is the same code. I don't know. I feel like this is shorter. Yeah, I think it has to do with the else here. I can't figure out anything else that would cause it. I'm wondering if we can ternary this. No, because we're creating it here. We can still ternary it. So we don't have to call the string formatter. I'm trying to relate it to the other side to make it easier, but you could inline this right here, and that could be the object. There's no problem with that. It's just a little more complicated to read to figure out what's going on, because it says create string formatter, but it's not really clear like that's going to be our object that we're putting it into. I think this is more clear having them separated where you can see that what we're doing. Normally, I don't like this indirection, but in this case, I don't think it's a problem. The only other thing I can think is that if we took this and we put it here in the proxy directly, then we could have a ternary on this piece. And so one ternary thing would be that, and the other ternary would be this. And that might even be more clear. I'm going to do it just for kicks, and we can implicitly return this ternary. Okay, so this is our initial, and 1 and 2, and this is our first one. This has less indirection in it. There's some benefits there. It's just not as clear. I said create string formatter, so I would assume that what this returns is a string formatter function. Okay. Yeah, this might be more clear because it's very like obvious here. There are only two things being returned. Whereas before it was a little bit harder to tell because the if statement, and you had to go find an else. And here you're going to have to find this too. Yeah, and what do you think of this? The difference here between the way we were doing it with object.create and then mutating the function we had with Object.defineProperties versus this one where we're not doing any mutations. We're creating a default return value for normal cases and then doing this proxy here so that we can proxy our string formatter and then give it the options, which is itself. I mean, this is recursive functionality, but it's not such a big deal. And they both return the same stuff. And this one's now shorter. Not by much, but it is shorter in the end. It's interesting. They're very similar. So I was almost on the right track last time. I feel like I made it a lot harder doing it this way. So let's do this too. Let's submit this new answer. I don't want that. I don't want any of this actually. I think that's it. And then I will test, make sure it passes. Oh, cannot find RSJS. Maybe we don't want these either. Cool, and then attempt. Submit. So this is our new question now. Anybody who was here last time or probably remembers me talking about, we'll find it. We'll find it. This one. I wonder if this was definitely made for this comment, but I almost feel like this person, they like went to Stack Overflow and somebody had put in a thing there, like the little snippet. They're like, here, just copy and paste this into your code. This one. Ugh. And see this plus sign. We don't have to do any of this. I don't have to do that plus sign. None of this stuff. I am doing concat though. Let me see. Is this a function? I think maybe. Man, I can't read it. So if we look at ours again, it's still, this is our old one? Yeah, this is our old one. Where's our new one? Did it not override with our new one? Did I find a bug? I want my new one in here. Oh, I see. There are two of them. Okay, our old one's there, and our new one is there too. Yeah, I definitely like the support better with the proxy. It makes more sense what's going on. It's clear. If I was reading this for the first time, this isn't really that clear, but it makes sense. Yeah, cool. If you like what you saw, feel free to like, subscribe, comment, give me some feedback. No, it sounds desperate. Okay, well, I'm so bad at these. I really would like any feedback that you have. It'd be great. Thank you so much for watching, and there will be plenty more videos coming. Thanks.